On this episode of China Uncensored, is Chinese propaganda invading our schools? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Now, when I hear something being called an important part of China's overseas propaganda setup by the former head of China's propaganda department, so much so that China has spent over $10 billion on it in 4 years alone, when a U.S. House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee says that same thing has been accused of engaging in industrial and military espionage, and when the director of Canada's FBI says that this thing is controlled by Chinese embassies and consulates, I can only come to one conclusion. This thing belongs in our schools! Okay, at first blush this seems kind of crazy, but when you really take a good look at it, you realize that it's even crazier. I'm of course talking about the now infamous Confucius Institutes. So aside from being a multi-billion-dollar affair championed by the head of China's propaganda department that may engage in industrial and military espionage, Confucius Institute also offer free Chinese language classes to schools. I want to sign up right now. Then I can learn Chinese by singing songs like I Love Beijing Tiananmen, our mighty leader Chairman Mao leading us all forward. I'm making up the tune, but the lyrics are real. That song was actually featured in a textbook used by Confucius Institutes. Now, believe it or not, when it was discovered that the Toronto District School Board, the fourth largest school board in North America and largest in Canada, was apparently pushing forward a deal with the Confucius Institutes without letting anyone know the details, a handful of parents got upset. Okay, I guess that was a little more than a handful. That footage was actually sent to me by someone on the scene who happens to be a fan of China Uncensored. You see, it turns out that most of the elected trustees in the school board really had little idea what the Confucius Institute was. It was only because one concerned parent named Michael Lewis actually took the time to research it that the deal didn't smoothly fly through. He created an online petition, saynotoci.ca, that got over 1,000 signatures in only a few days. According to my source on the scene, 200 concerned parents and activists showed up to what was supposed to be the last meeting of the school year. The Confucius Institute agreement wasn't even on the agenda. They ended up talking about it for 2 hours. Chris Bolton, the chair of the TDSB and man responsible for the deal with the Chinese government, said nothing. Even after 2 hours, they couldn't figure out what had happened. So they scheduled another meeting, probably in an effort to help the Toronto District School Board actually look into what they were signing. The 47,000-member American Association of University Professors released a statement accusing Confucius Institutes of flouting basic rules of academic freedom and integrity. But just a side note about Chris Bolton, he reportedly makes frequent trips to China, speaks Mandarin, has a brother working for a major Chinese bank, and is helping him get investors to set up businesses in Canada. Bolton has also been involved in a number of scandals involving a charity he used to run. But he weathered those scandals. 2 days after this happened, he suddenly and mysteriously retired with only 5 months left in his term. So when the next meeting happened, this time with around 500 outside, including Tibetans, Uyghurs, and Taiwanese protesters, the only man who could have answered questions about the deal with the Confucius Institute wasn't there. Apparently, what came out after the trustees reviewed the minutes was that Chris Bolton entered negotiations with the Confucius Institute in 2009. 2012 was the first time it ever came before the Board of Trustees, and that was only 2 brief bullet points. By the next time Confucius Institute was brought up, the contract had already been signed without even a discussion or review of the contract where a counter-argument could have been made. No wonder the trustees knew nothing about the Confucius Institute. Now, there was one person at this meeting last week that knew anything about the contract. That was a lawyer who had been there for the negotiation process. But he said he couldn't say anything because the contract was confidential, which is unusual for a deal being made by elected officials that affects a school district. That was actually a point made by the American Association of University Professors that most agreements establishing Confucius Institutes feature non-disclosure clauses and unacceptable concessions to the political aims and practices of the government of China. Whew! this must be a special summer episode of China Uncensored because this one is extra shady. To help show the parents just how baseless their fears were that the Confucius Institute was being controlled by the Chinese government, the Chinese government wrote 2 letters to the Toronto School Board saying if they suspended the Confucius Institute, there would be great damage done to Chinese-Canadian relations. Despite the outcry, the school board did not terminate the contract, but only decided to delay a decision until a later date. But Chris Bolton hasn't fallen off the edge of the earth. He's still totally open and honest about the whole thing. Why, he even did an interview with Canada's national radio broadcaster.
But you leave with a cloud that hangs over top of you. And so what did that have to do with...
What cloud is that? I don't have any clouds. Nothing but sunny skies and opportunities.
Well, that's an odd way to put it, considering the massive scandal. I wonder what he says the reason for the outcry is.
There are protests around this and around the Toronto District School Board aligning itself with an organization that is supervised and funded by the Chinese government. You're saying that none of that is creating a cloud over your time as chair of the Toronto District School Board?
No, that's why it took, actually, the Confucius Institute is why I didn't announce earlier in the week, because I was so concerned about the Confucius Institute that I wanted to be there on Wednesday night last when the planning and priorities meeting was happening. I am very pleased with the Confucius Institute, and by and large, the people who are complaining about the Confucius Institute are aligned with the Falun Gong.
So let me get this straight. One of the TDSB trustees, Irene Atkinson, said she's getting 200 emails a day from anxiety-ridden people who want nothing to do with the Institute, and Bolton is blaming it all on Falun Gong. Since when do elected Canadian officials start sounding like Chinese Communist Party officials? I mean, even the interviewer was speechless. So what do you think about the Confucius Institute? Should they be allowed in schools? Should the US listen to the suggestion of the American Association of University Professors and have the 100 universities with Confucius Institutes cancel or renegotiate their agreements? Leave your comments below and share and subscribe. Also, you can visit saynotoci.ca to sign a petition or email the trustees of the Toronto District School Board your thoughts. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored, and one more time for the road, our mighty leader, Chairman Mao, leading all of us forward.